Welcome everybody to the GenPEM Artists from Home virtual Q&A with Becca McCharen-Tran. My name is Carrie Schneider, and I just really want to welcome and thank all of you for being here.
And I'm Trevor Smith, the curator of the present tense and the associate director for multisensory experience at the Peabody Essex Museum.
GenPEM Artists from Home series was designed to connect with artists who are at home during this global pandemic, to learn more about their work and to connect them with PEM's community.
And GenPEM is a really exciting group that I really love, because I think of it as PEM's creative community, and in which we partner with creative businesses, organizations, and artists to present events such as tonight's Artists from Home event with Becca McCharen-Tran.
You can learn more at pem.org/GenPEM, and we'll send you more information after this event. And now I want to introduce Petra Slinkard. She's PEM's Director of Curatorial Affairs and the Nancy B. Putnam Curator of Fashion and Textiles. Petra joined PEM in 2018 following her role as Curator of Costume at the Chicago History Museum. She oversees PEM's newly opened Carl and Iris Barrel Apfel Gallery of Fashion and Design, and is the co-curator of Made It, the Women Who Revolutionized Fashion, which opened at PEM November 21st. At PEM, Petra fosters the growth and inclusive spirit of the museum's fashion initiative to develop vibrant exhibitions, installations, and programming that celebrate the global impact and reach of fashion and textiles. She's an active member of the Costume Society of America and the American Association of Museum Curators. We're so excited to hear her conversation with Becca tonight. As a reminder, you can start entering your questions into the Q&A box for Becca, which we'll get to later this evening. So welcome, Petra.
Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Trevor. I'm super excited about today's program. Thank you all for being here. I think we are going to start with our slideshow, and I would be remiss to not sort of remind all of you that we've got an exhibition going on titled Made It, the Women Who Revolutionized Fashion. It opened, as Carrie mentioned, on November 21st, and it is on view through March 14. I realize that right now is a really strange time, and if you feel safe and we remain open, which I hope, please come and see us. I think the show is really fun and illuminating, and it gives us an opportunity to reveal, recognize, and celebrate the women who have made a lasting impact in fashion, one of whom we're so fortunate to have with us today. So the Peabody Essex Museum, if you go to the next slide, was able to purchase these two bathing suits from Chromat, which is a company that was founded in 2018 by our special guest this evening, Becca McCharen-Tran. Becca went to school for architecture at the University of Virginia of Architecture, and basically trained for many years, and started her collection in 2010, where she fuses a technical background with a focus on the body to create designs for boundary-breaking women who include Beyonce, Madonna, and Nicki Minaj. She was a Forbes 30 under 30 pick for people who are reinventing the world, and speaks about the fraught impact that fashion had on her own upbringing, motivating her to reshape the industry into a more inclusive and accessible space. Each Chromat collection explores the intersection of architecture, fashion, and technology, producing garments that augment and enhance the body's performance through the innovative design and cutting-edge technical fabrics. Chromat is designed in New York and Miami by a diverse team of creative collaborators ranging from artists and scientists to choreographers. And as I mentioned, she is a featured designer in our exhibition, Made It, the Women Who Revolutionized Fashion. So I'd love to introduce you to Becca McCharen-Tran, who's going to now take it over and walk us through the collections that specifically led to these two pieces that the Peabody Essex Museum is so fortunate to have. Welcome, Becca.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Petra, and the PEM team. It's an honor to be talking with you tonight. And I hope everyone's staying safe. And so yeah, let's dive in. I hope one day I get to actually see the exhibit if the stars align. So if any of you watching tonight are near PEM, you should definitely go check it out. So I'm just gonna walk you through the two pieces that are in the exhibit. If you could go to the next slide. This is other way. There's a picture of Chromat. So Chromat is future forward bodywear for strong, powerful Chromat babes. I started it, like Petra said, in 2010, and over the years, it has evolved from kind of architecture pieces all the way to the bodywear and swimwear and lingerie that you see today. This image is actually from a campaign we did where we rewrote the pool rules. So we cast a bunch of lifeguards to kind of like enforce rules around inclusivity around the pool. Like some of the rules were intolerance not tolerated, no age restrictions, all body hair appreciated, all abilities accepted. So yeah, this was kind of like our safety team of Chromat babes, who I love very much, shot by Anastasia Garcia. Let's go to the next slide. Oh yeah, let's just dive right in. I wanted to show everybody a glimpse of some of our runway shows. You can just start the video whenever. So what you're about to see is oh yeah, there's Rico Nasty, and she's introducing the finale from our 2020 spring 2020 show, which debuted at New York Fashion Week last September. And this was our big 10-year anniversary show. So we have pieces ranging from inspired and remade from like the scaffolding pieces that I started off with straight out of architecture school to the bodywear you see now. And you'll see on the runway all different types of people, all the different Chromat babes that inspire us. We recognize, you know, there's the fashion industry for so long has celebrated a very specific type of beauty, which is thin, white, cisgender, young, able-bodied. And so we wanted to make sure that our runways explode that idea, that narrow definition of beauty. And so what you're gonna see today is all different types of Chromat babes rocking it on the runway. So please enjoy a little bit of the finale with Rico Nasty.
Got some Gucci, tell these bitches pull up and they playing hooky. If you ain't got bottles of bands, bitch, don't book me. Run up on a dark alley in a black hoodie. Bitch, this is the sugar trap, turn your shit to pudding. I'm always in the stew, bitch, look at what I'm cooking. I'm always in some new shit, so these hoes looking. And if you run up, I bet you getting your shit tooken. I'm a poppin' ass bitch, let me remind ya. Don't hide, I can always come and find ya. Ain't no bitch in me, bitch, come proper. In a Audi going fast, you behind us. I'm a poppin' ass bitch, let me remind ya. Don't hide, I can always come and find ya. Ain't no bitch in me, bitch, come proper. In a Audi going fast, you behind us. Hey, every day is lovely, every day is sunny. I don't need your money, bitch, I got my own money. Should've seen this shit, come and seen that bitch. Start punching, red Audi fruit, punch it. If we fight, you know my niggas gonna jump it. I ain't scared, bitch, just a whole lot of gang shit. I'm a bear, you a motherfucking reindeer. Where I stay, you can't motherfucking stay there. Yeah, and I had to make that shit clear, bitch.
I did not realize how explicit the content was.
I said I'm in a red Audi, bitches fruit punching. On the beat, I don't punch it. I'm a poppin' ass bitch, let me remind ya. Don't hide, I can always come and find ya. Ain't no bitch in me, bitch, come proper. In a Audi going fast, you behind us.
There's some of the team behind the scenes, stylists, designers, hair, interns, staff, collaborators. There's me. Oh my god, I'm wearing the same outfit. Alright. Go to the next slide. Oh, giving my mom a hug. Okay. Wow. Sorry for the explicit lyrics for anyone who was offended by that. I totally forgot. I hope you enjoyed the runway show. And I guess I'm wearing the same exact outfit that I was a year ago, so we made it. So anyway, in the runway show, you'll see a piece that is actually currently in the PEM exhibit, and it's shown on this model, Giovanna, in the middle here. And I thought it would be cool to show that runway show in relation to the exhibit because it kind of explains how we got from point A to point B. On the left is a picture of me from one of our first runway shows with two amazing chromate babes who are wearing these kind of like scaffolding for the body. This collection was inspired by Archigram and Super Studios and all these grids, taking the grids of the Super Studios architecture to the body. And then you can see that structural language is still utilized in the bodywear that we design today. So the kind of very similar language, just in different forms. So, and the piece of that is in the exhibit and on the model here is actually made of velvet, and the swimwear, the velvet fabric is made in our same swimwear factory in, we have a mill in Italy. So you can go to the next slide. So I wanted to show you a little behind the scenes from another piece that's in the exhibit at PEM, which is the wet print suit. We did this in collaboration with photographer Dana Scruggs. Dana is an amazing photographer, and you might recognize some of her recent work. She shot Megan Thee Stallion for the cover of Time. She shot the cover of Washington Post with, oh shoot, now I forget. An amazing politician. Oh, Stacey Abrams. And she shot a bunch of amazing people. She's an incredible photographer. And I knew the high contrast style that she's known for would be perfect when I was thinking of this collection in particular. And this collection and these pieces that are inspired by wet t-shirts, but kind of wanting to recontextualize them outside of this kind of like hetero kind of ideal of objectifying women. And also the other side of the wet t-shirt conversation I felt like was like in 8th grade when you're too embarrassed to show your body and you're wearing a ginormous shirt over your swimwear. So this kind of wet t-shirt theme is sort of this vulnerable garment in all different aspects of life. And we wanted to kind of reimagine it in this more empowering way. So we shot two amazing models wearing wet t-shirts, and we utilized the print, you can go to the next slide, for a series of wet garments that we showed on the runway. And then the piece on the top row, second to the left, is in the exhibit at PEM. So actually, another funny story about this show in particular, we really wanted to kind of have the essence of wetness. Moisture is the essence of wetness. We wanted to have this kind of wet t-shirt moment on the runway. So we actually had kiddie pools backstage, and we were dumping water on the model. So their skin and everything was dripping and just soaked. You can see their hair is wet. So yeah, that's the inspiration behind those two pieces in the exhibit. I hope you enjoyed the little backstory. There they are. So yay. You can see swimwear from all different eras, it looks like. I really want to see the exhibit myself. What do we have next? I think the last thing I'll leave you with is what we're up to now. This is actually a more recent collection that we debuted in February of 2020. It was supposed to go along with it was kind of imagined as this Chromat 2020 Olympic team, inspired by what we anticipated was the Olympics that was going to happen in 2020. Apparently that 2020 had other plans for us, but we still went ahead and launched this collection. So we were thinking about the Olympics, but wanted to interrogate the way the Olympics is basically a gender police. So any athletes that are gender non-conforming or don't conform to these narrow definitions of what it means to be a man or a woman are banned from the sport, like we've seen with Caster Semenya, forced to undergo body modifications. So we wanted to kind of reimagine the Olympics in a more gender inclusive way. So we cast a team of Chromat babes who are all athletes, dancers, cultural workers, and inspiration in their own right. And kind of created this collection of garments that has a lot of like athletic language, but in a very like non-binary, not a single color, very like ombres and spectrums within the garments. And for our campaign, which we collaborated with Tourmaline on, we shot a film with this incredible filmmaker named Tourmaline, and she has, yeah, we're about to show the film, so pull the film up when you can. But I'll give you a little behind the scenes on the film. So this film is a short film, and basically what we're saying with the collection and what we want to reinforce through all our messaging around this is that trans people and non-binary people belong in sport. Not only do they belong in sport, but they're kind of the leaders in sport, to where they're creating this new place where they determine their body. Like they're basically saying, well, you'll see in this film, it's a short 3-minute film, but they're kind of like the leaders to me in this new conceptualization of what athletics can be. So I'll let the film speak for itself. So here it is now, filmed by Tourmaline.
Trans people and non-binary people are playing the sport because they love the sport, and only for that reason.
They don't get it, obviously. Like, they confuse our personal life and sports. Like, oh, it's just sports, but it's no. You're basically telling me that I'm not a female, so I have to participate with males.
There is no simple way to regulate people into biological categories of male and female. The second that we cede that control to people outside of ourselves, it's going to hurt everyone.
I personally don't feel that one would choose to go through all that we go through with transitioning solely to win a few medals. I don't think that's realistic.
They make it seem like we're the only true transgender athletes ever in the whole world, and we're really not. It's just that we speak up and we stand for ourselves, which is important. And I feel like when other trans people see that, it really inspires them to do the same, because not everyone is brave or outspoken like we are.
If we are not going to, then who will?
At least get to know my name first before you judge me.
My goal is to educate people. I think that's what helps me get through, the misunderstanding or the ignorance or any other negative, aspect that comes with what we're doing.
I wasn't really expecting to be, this role model, I guess.
You are excellent at what you do, and I want you to feel that joy and the range of emotions that come with sport.
Never in a million years would I have imagined us sitting here now, advocating for transgender rights, or even having to go through what we've gone through.
We had to fight for our womanhood, and I like that.
One thing I love about sports is the way in which we can connect with our bodies and build solidarity with other people as we're sort of testing the limits of how we understand ourselves.
What I love about sports is I just found a second family. You really create a whole nother family instead of friends just being at track meets.
Perry and I, even though we're on different teams and we go to different schools, whenever we are at a meet together, we always say hi, we always have a conversation, we always, catch up with each other.
You don't have to be on the same team. It would be something like, hey girl, how you doing?
Having that love and solidarity when the world is telling you you're not lovable, you don't deserve solidarity, that's beautiful.
I say Perry and I are my favorite athletes.
We did it like no other.
Yes, the fan club is strong.
Being an athlete is hard by itself. That's clear. Especially because we're student athletes. We're not just athletes who just pass by. We actually do our schoolwork, and we still managed to do that for, Andrea for 4 years, me for 3. I mean, I'm very proud of both of us.
I think our transness is the best thing in the world because it makes us who we are.
What is the potential for my body, and how can I decide what that is? I think that trans people are the ultimate guides for sport.
Where I am now is a place I'm happy. It took so much dedication and everything, but I did it. So it shows that I'm capable of anything, really. Listen, I do track, but off the track, I'm that girl.
Yay.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. truly. You know, you in the last 10 years have traveled a long way. You've had quite the journey. Um, and I was wondering if maybe you could just tell us a little bit about, you know, where it began, you know, where you began as a student of architecture, and how you transitioned into fashion and what that first collection was like for you.
So yeah, the very, very first collection I did was actually something I did out of my bedroom in a small town in Virginia where I was living. This was, I had never met a fashion designer in my life. This was pre-Project Runway, or in the midst of Project Runway. I just had a sewing machine, and I liked taking the ideas that I kind of formed in architecture, which was a love of scaffolding in this interstitiary space between indoor and outdoor, and raiding Joann fabrics and their bridal section for corsetry and boning, and using materials I got at Goodwill to kind of craft these the scaffoldings for the body. That's where it all began. And then I moved to New York in 2010 after showing a couple runway shows in Virginia. And yeah, I thought I would have to keep working in architecture, because when I started Chromat, I was a city planner and doing historical preservation and urban redevelopment. And I thought I'd have to keep working in architecture when I moved to New York. And I was like, I got this one order from one store, and I sewed everything myself and shipped it to the store. And I was like, okay, as soon as I ship this order, like, I'm going to make a list of firms I'm going to apply to. I'm going to, send my resume out. And then I got another order, and I made all the garments myself and shipped it out. And then 3 months later, it kind of dawned on me that I never had time to apply to a real job. And so that's where I decided that Chromat was my real job. And that was 10 years ago.
And where did you come up with the name Chromat? What does that mean to you?
I'm obsessed with organizing things like monochromatically, like rainbow order. And so it was the Greek derivative for the word color, chroma. That's where it began.
Fantastic. Thank you. So, one of the aspects that we talk about in the exhibition on the label is that, from the outset of the company in 2010, you and the Chromat team have led the conversation in fashion on and around gender fluidity, racial inequality, and body acceptance, and that you've made a conscious effort to show your collections on trans and non-gender conforming models, almost all of whom are people of color. And most recently, I think you were featured in Vogue with Gillian Smith in talking about the casting of your shows. And I'm wondering if you can just tell us a little bit about how you cast your shows and what inspires you in designing your presentations and these specific experiences that showcase your shows, because they are so much more than just runway shows.
Yeah, the runway shows have always been a celebration for me of the community that I came up with in New York, my friends. I mean, when I first started, it wasn't like I was casting models. I was begging my friends to model for me. And so that kind of reflected who I was around at the time, like being in the queer scene in New York. But yeah, the casting that you see today is all thanks to Gillian Smith, my co-collaborator. And she helped me kind of like cobble together enough people to have a runway show at the very beginning. But when we're casting, we're looking for confidence and a strong stomp. Like, it doesn't matter who you are, but if you can exude that power, that is what we always look for when we have these big open calls with 300 people like coming to do a walk for us. But I think, like, more than anything, everything that we do at Chromat, I recognize the responsibility that we have as a fashion label to show the world that we want to see, and also to work hard to untangle and deconstruct so much of the white supremacist cultural hegemony that the fashion industry exists within. And if I can utilize the platform that I have with Chromat to celebrate friends and inspiring people around me that haven't historically been at the center of the industry, then that's what I want to do.
Thank you. And, with that, you're talking about the responsibility that comes with being a fashion designer. And specifically in 2019, you gave, I think, a really powerful TED Talk. And for everyone who hasn't seen that, I recommend that you look that up. Where you talk specifically about the responsibilities that come with being a fashion designer, and also the ongoing fight for fat acceptance and body autonomy. And I'm wondering if you could share us a little bit about what that experience was like to be on stage, and what you learned, to talk about that on stage, and what you learned as a result of sharing that point of view.
Yeah, the TED Talk was so scary. I've done a few talks in my day, but the pressure oh my God, like to memorize the 8-minute or 10-minute or 15-minute thing, like, oh, so nerve-wracking. They actually gave me a speech coach. Like everyone that does a TED Talk has a speech coach where they train. Like, for example, the speech coach told me, like, because I'm a visual person, and so she was like, if you practice doing your speech in the same room, looking at the same objects, you're gonna freak out if those objects are no longer there to look at. So I had to like reposition myself every time I practice in a different room. But yeah, I think that experience was really great. I think just as I've gotten older, like I felt like the need and urgency to kind of recognize where I came from and how the fashion industry affected me as a young teen girl, like having an eating disorder and feeling bad about myself because, I only saw like one thing in this kind of one idea of beauty, and thinking that in order to be like desirable or acceptable or, fit in, that I had to kind of like conform. And I think that, looking back at everything we've done with Chromat, it's kind of shown like how much I really wanted to change that for that experience for people growing up now. So yeah, it was a little nerve-wracking to get that personal with the TED Talk, but I think it was for the best, and I'm glad that it happened.
Good. I'm glad too. Well, I mentioned to you earlier that when I was giving a tour of the gallery, someone remarked on the velvet Highline swimsuit, and they said, "Oh, well, that you can't possibly wear swimming." And I took the liberty of correcting them. And you mentioned as you were talking this evening about that particular collection that this was material that was made in Italy. But obviously the materials that you use and the silhouettes that you design are really quite complex, obviously drawing from your architectural background and always intentional. And I'm wondering if you can just kind of walk us through, how you conceptualize a collection. Is it one idea? Is it one word? How are you drawn to the materials that you use?
Every collection is so drastically different. And I think that was the goal. Like I was really inspired by growing up, loved Bjork and how every album that she made was so completely different sound. So for Chromat, our goal is to just kind of like I don't know, there's some collections that are inspired by, for example, when I moved to Miami, we made a collection that really focused on climate change. And we've done collections inspired by 3D printing. We've done collections inspired by like art exhibits. There's just like, it's such a range. Oh yeah, one collection we did actually after Trump got elected, we were just obviously living in New York and filled with panic and anxiety. So we made this whole collection of inflatables, some of which we remade for the runway show that we showed here. But we made this whole collection of inflatables to kind of help the user as the wearer keep their head above water in rough open seas. So we're kind of responding, like for me, fashion design is just a way to synthesize the world and like understand my feelings. So that's kind of, it's such a range. But I would say with the fabrics, like for example, the mill that we work with in Italy, they have a cool story about sustainability, that a lot of our swimwear is made from recycled fishing nets. So the factory in Italy works with a team of divers who go and swim to the bottom of the ocean in different seas around Italy, Mediterranean Sea, Adriatic Sea, and different waterways, where I guess for a lot of fisher people, it's cheaper to just drop, if you have a hole in your net, it's cheaper to drop the net than to have, I think you have to like pay to get it repaired or to turn it in, I think. So yeah, there's just a lot of trash at the bottom of the oceans, including dead ghost nets. And so these divers go and grab all these nets from the bottom of the ocean, and then the nylon nets are melted down, and then they're turned into nylon thread that's then woven back into the fabric that's used in our swimwear. So it's pretty cool that they've been able to create this circular process with some of their materials.
That's fantastic. I love that. I didn't know that. That's wonderful. So, one of the words that I think is applied a lot to you and to your brand is thoughtful. And I think that that's a really lovely term to apply, because I do think that, the way that you approach design is really multi-layered. And you talked to us a little bit about your collaboration with Dana Scruggs, who of course is a tremendous talent and a photographer whose star is totally launching. But you've also had, the opportunity to work with these other really amazing leaders in the art and culture sector, like Kimberly Drew. If anyone is on Instagram, you probably know her as Museum Mammy, or Tourmaline, who of course you mentioned in the video, and is also a very hot up and coming artist and film maker. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the experience to produce Joy Run. Because if you watch the 20-minute version, that's a really complex film to make, particularly this year, during this time. So
Yeah, that film came together really beautifully. Actually, Tourmaline DM'd me like months and months ago about doing a collab, and I was like, sure. I had been a fan of hers for a while. She's the reason I know who Marsha P. Johnson is. Tourmaline is an incredible archivist as well as artist, and she's done a lot of work to unearth like old and digitize like old records of Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson speeches from over the years, who are both like kind of the at the forefront of the gay rights movement in New York and queer rights. But yeah, Tourmaline's incredible. Making this film was such a joy. Like, she's such a joyful and like, she's so optimistic, which I think is really, for this year to have made this film, was really needed. Like, every step of the way that we were, making this project, if we ever had to make a decision about casting or whatever, like what the models are going to wear, it was always like, what's going to bring you joy? Like, what makes you happy? What makes you excited to show up on set? We're going to cast that person. And so I learned a lot from her, just joyfulness in every element of her being. The two women, the track runners, the student athletes that we showed in the film, Andrea Yearwood and Terry Miller, they actually have been in the news a lot this year because they became defendants in a case where the state of Connecticut was being sued by a team of athletes, high school athletes and their parents, basically saying that these two trans girl runners had an unfair advantage and they should be banned from running track in high school. So that's when Andrea and Terry, their lawyer was also in the film, Chase Strangio, who is an incredible trans rights activist at the ACLU. So Chase has been representing Andrea and Terry in court, and it's crazy to be in a time right now where, this is real life. Like, there's actively cases where high schools are trying to ban, trans athletes from participating. And I think that's such a shame. It does come from a lot of like athletic legislation comes from top down. So that's why we were looking at the Olympics specifically, because whatever rules the Olympics sets is what the NCAA, is what the high schools follow. And so, we're at a really important time where the Olympics could make decisions to be more gender inclusive, but they are actually doing the opposite, where they're banning athletes that don't conform. And if you study, the history of trans athletes and gender non-conforming athletes in the Olympics, they're always coming up with some new thing. Like, it's testosterone, it's, genitals, it's this, it's that, it's chromosomes. There's always just a new random thing. Gender is not, it's not just two categories, and there's just no way that you can decide across the board who's allowed and who's not allowed to participate. And I think in creating this film with Tourmaline, I think she really captured this kind of way of like what Chase was saying in the film, like, once you cede control to determine your own body to this other person or to this other organization, like you lose that control. And I think it's important to give each person the control over their own body to determine who they are and how they want to compete and what they want to wear. And I think, I'm sure that's something that kind of relates to the exhibit with women designers. Like, it's so much about having body autonomy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that response. And I know we've got a ton of questions, so I'm going to leave it with this last question. Um, but for those of you who know me as a curator and know about the exhibition, I'll tell you that Becca was one of my first calls when I knew that we were doing the show and we wanted to expand our narrative into the 21st century. And one of the things that I really love about Chromat is that you are a sportswear and swimwear line. And, I think that when people typically think of fashion, they don't necessarily reference sportswear as far as athletic wear is concerned. But, in my opinion, particularly in the way in which you present your clothing and your work, it is equally one part fashion and one part active wear. And I'm just wondering, kind of what you say to people who discredit sportswear as being unfashionable.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I'm not so much worried about categories anymore at this point. I think like with what we do at Chromat, our goal is to create, garments that are these interventions or augmentations of the body in whatever ways, in whatever form that takes. So I don't know. I think, does it really matter anymore? That's
That's a
kind of
great answer.
my take on like, is sportswear unfashionable? I don't know. I kind of think the older I get, the less I care about these categories, and just wear what you want to wear and what makes you feel good, and let the curators decide.
Thanks. So with that, I think we'll open this up to questions because I know we have quite a few and some really good ones too. So Carrie, I don't know if you want to come back on. Fantastic.
Hi. Yeah, we have some good questions coming in. One from Stacy. She's asking, can you speak more about your collaboration with Reebok?
Oh yeah, so that was the film with Tourmaline, was actually a celebration of the shoes that we built with Reebok. So we've worked with Reebok for 3 seasons now. It was really cool. I mean, it started off with just through friends knowing someone who worked at Reebok, and they would actually, when we were doing runway shows, there's so much that goes in behind the scenes. It's like you wouldn't even know. But basically, when you're having 30 models, you're like, oh, they need shoes. So you either have to buy the shoes or borrow them from someone. So that's how Reebok kind of came into our orbit. We were looking to borrow shoes for the runway show, and they let us have some like different shoes, and that's kind of how the collaboration started. And then it got to the point where we were like, okay, we have this collection and we'd really like to make a specific colorway that matches the clothes. Like, can we do that? And that's where it started to ramp up. And then with the most recent collection for the Olympics inspired collection, that was like my dream shoe, the Insta Pump. It's the Reebok shoe with no laces. You like pump it up with a little pump thingy. It's kind of like from the 90s. I don't know if anyone remembers that, the pump shoes, but yeah, that was my dream shoe. And so for each collection, like they've let us kind of like take the reins in like determining the materials and the colors. And for that one, we had lots of like ombres and lines of a track, which was inspired by the runners like Castor Semenya.
So cool. This might be a good question for both of you. Someone's asking, how do you see the role of museum relating to the fashion industry?
Well, I would say for me, like having not grown up around knowing any fashion designers, I loved going to, like when I was older, I used to go to opening ceremony, which was a store in Chinatown, and I would just like touch everything and just look at how the garments were made. To me, that was a museum, like being able to look at the construction and look at the fabrics. And I don't know, I've learned so much, like going to the FIT Museum in New York. They have a great costume exhibit as well. Yeah, it's a great place to learn. I don't know, what do you think, Petra?
No, and I love that you mentioned opening ceremony, because I think that opening ceremony was like one of the first platforms that kind of hit the mainstream if you had access to it, that provided you with these sort of capsule collections where artists were working with designers and kind of blending, or blurring these lines. But I mean, obviously, as a curator of fashion, I'm an advocate for it in museums. But I do think that, as far as, Becca, what you mentioned, as far as exposure, not everybody has an opportunity to travel, to these fashion capitals and engage, with New York Fashion Week. And so in a way, it's an opportunity to bring these stories and these, personal experiences and narratives to people where they are. But it also gives them an opportunity to kind of hopefully see themselves in some of that, narrative as well.
I have to say, one of my favorite fashion exhibits I've ever seen in my life was Gautier at the Brooklyn Museum. That blew my mind. Did you get to see that?
I have seen it, yeah.
Oh, so good. Because the models actually had talking heads. They had projections on their faces where they were talking about the garments.
And what's crazy is that it's still on tour.
Oh, true. Oh, such a good show. That really changed my life, because that was something where I'd seen on style.com growing, and like fashion blogs, and then being able to see it in real life, like, oh, it was even better in person. Like, so cool.
We have a question from Svetlana. Becca, where are you taking your inspiration?
At the moment, to be honest, I haven't been that inspired. I feel like everyone's just in survival mode. I'm hoping to like get back to Miami soon and be able to be in the water and do water sports once everyone has the vaccine, and be able to collaborate with artists again. I don't know. This year has been a point of reflection, actually. I guess I have been actually very inspired in the sense that I've been taking classes. Like, I took a class at the University of Miami on Black feminist theory. I'm currently in a class on Marxist feminism. So I'm just taking this time to start absorbing again. Instead of focusing on so much output this year, it's kind of been a chance to regenerate a little bit. And right now I'm kind of inspired about like, what could fashion look like outside of capitalism? Because I think we've all determined that capitalism, the system isn't working. There's a lot of people where, if you put profits before the environment and before humanity, like the end game is not good. And it's not it's not a frame in which survival and like to see people thrive, that's just not, unless you're a millionaire or billionaire, it's just, this year has shown us that it's not working. So what are the alternatives? What else can we build? And how can fashion exist in that alternative universe? That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Bob's asking you, for each new collection, can you describe your creative process?
Starts with the mood board. It starts with a secret Pinterest board with me and the team. Like, everybody just dumps in photos. Sometimes it starts with a specific direction. Like, if what I love about fashion versus architecture is the speed. So every 6 months, you have to stop what you're doing, finish it, put it on the runway, and then you go on to the next, versus architecture, which can take years to kind of see your vision come to life. So I love the speed, and sometimes it's so fast that we don't get to finish an idea, so we'll bring it into the next season. But it always starts with the mood board, a secret Pinterest board, and then that becomes like a printed out physical mood board in the studio. We do pencil sketches, and then whatever ones we choose from that, we also go into like fabric swatching, and then start making samples of the sketches. Sometimes it's simple stuff like, oh, the suit that we liked 2 years ago, like it sold really well, let's make an update. Or sometimes it'll be completely new, or completely like, just this is something crazy and it tells the story and it should be shown on the runway. So once we start making samples, then we do a lot of fit testing with different people in the studio. Back in the day, we used to make all our samples in a size small, and then for the runway, we'd make custom sizes for each individual model. So we'd make each plus size garment specifically to that model. We cast them ahead of time and then make the garment. But now that we have like different mannequins of different sizes in the studio, we can sample at the very beginning of the process on we have a size 22. So that's really wonderful to be able to sample on different shapes. And then a lot of the samples, like sometimes that's when things die. You'll never see it again because we're like, oh, it was cool on paper, but it didn't work. And once we get the sample, then we do it in final fabric. Then we do it on the runway. Post runway, we decide what we actually want to sell. And then we go to our factory. We have factories in New York and Bulgaria. We go to the factory and we start making a bunch of them. And then we do production with that, shoot the campaign, put it on a web shop, and then start shipping it. So that's like from mood board to it arrives at your doorstep. That's the full cycle.
It's like so impressive. This is a question maybe for both of you. Somebody's asking about the Made It, the Women Who Revolutionized Fashion title, and what does being revolutionary mean to you both?
You want to take that?
You named the exhibit, right?
Yeah, I did. Well, I mean, with help.
Let's hear it.
Well, I think that obviously that's a loaded term. I mean, we're looking to try to get people in, but I think it's, at its simplest and probably most effective definition, it's people who make a difference and, people who are moving the dial forward. And I think in a way it's about challenging where you are currently, and it's about, trying to carve out new space. And maybe that was what was happening in the mid 20th century with women who in the United States were focused on American sportswear, which totally broke from the French tradition. Or it's an individual like Becca, who is designing, with a whole new and it sounds like the wrong way to define that is that, that, oh, well, this is so groundbreaking, but yet it is. And, and I think it's because we haven't had a universal embrace of this particular acceptance. And, the fact that Chromat from its inception has, built this into its design ethos, I think is revolutionary. That it never, that the brand and that you, Becca, as a designer, never questioned whether or not this wasn't about following a trend or buying into some kind of manufactured, sales pitch. This is essential to the ethos of the brand. And to me, that's revolutionary. So
I agree.
I mean, I'm looking at these articles all day about the latest collection, the Joy Run film, and the way in which people talk about you. I mean, I'll just read it here for a second because I just pulled it up and I love it, and it says that Chromat's newest offering, a short film. This is from Refinery 29. Chromat's newest offering, a short film titled Joy Run that was directed by Tourmaline. It's clear that no one should ever underestimate McCharen-Tran. And in Vogue, talking about the exact same collection, there's a sense that if there is a boundary, that Becca is ready to push it. And I feel like those are the sentiments that sort of support this idea that both Chromat and Becca are revolutionary designers.
Thank you, Petra. That's very nice.
So maybe one last question before we wrap up. Someone's asking, what are you envisioning for your next collection?
Well, actually, I don't know. Should I give it all away? I don't know. I think that I'm not really sure. The biggest thing I've been plotting is like how fashion can exist outside of capitalism. And I do think that centers workers' rights movements. And I think for us, we've always made sure that the factories we work with are ethical, safe. But I'm curious, like I'm continuing to explore like how I can utilize our production top to bottom, like our whole kind of like production process and make sure that everyone who's making the garments is equally as empowered as, you know, the models who wear it. I don't know, I'm kind of thinking more about like the inner workings of a company and how that can be tweaked and changed. And I think like for me, this year I've just been really taking a lot more inspiration from smaller brands. I feel like in the past 10 years, doing the CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund and doing other programs that kind of like mentor young and emerging designers, I've been on this track to where, you know, they look at brands like Michael Kors or Donna Karan or Ralph Lauren, who created a lifestyle brand and who do a lot of licensing deals where you can get socks, sheets, bedding, you know, perfume. They kind of see that as success. And I've been kind of thinking like, for me at this point, success is doing it on your own terms. We don't have investors, so every step of the way for Chromat, there's no safety net, and it's always like, you know, between if one collection doesn't sell well, that's the end of it. So I don't know. I'm just trying to kind of realign everything that, what does it mean? Like, what does success mean for me? And yeah, I think like reimagining what that looks like and then reimagining how to empower everybody in the entire production process is sort of the inspiration moving forward.
It's amazing. Okay, as much as I hate to wind down and wrap this up, I just really want to thank you both for this incredible conversation and for your answers. You know, is there anything last sort of comments either of you want to make at this point? Or I think
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I think we're all excited to see, you know, what's next for you and what's next for Chromat. And, you know, as we continue our fashion program at PEM, you know, we hope to continue to have these kinds of conversations, and hopefully we'll have Becca back and we'll be able to check in again and see where you're headed.
And I just want to encourage everybody to save the date for our next GenPEM Artists from Home. That will be with OJ Slaughter on January 21st from 6 to 7. She's a creator whose work centers on Black liberation, and her latest project, The History of Right Now, documents the Black Lives Matter movement in Boston. So stay tuned for an invitation. I'd also like to thank Lauren Fairweather, Erin Lewis, Olivia Barry, and Julie Dywald for their contributions for this evening. And for now, stay warm in the snow and have a great night wherever you are. And thanks for being here with us tonight.
Thank
you.